We're doing it. Welcome to episode 1 of my podcast, The Ultimate Female. My name is Callie. And if you've been here a while, that probably makes sense because basically the ultimate female, if you don't know, it's my sporty ode to the divine feminine. Now, we all have divine feminine and divine masculine energy. I'll get into that much later. But so the ultimate female is my sporty ode to my divine feminine energy. So, and this is going to be kind of my journey of how I got here, my story, and then also like things I learned along the way. A lot of you have been asking recently about like the change in my content, and for me personally, I don't feel like it's actually that much of a change in my content. I feel like if you look through basically like the energetic thread or overall themes of my social media, since I've had it, it's all really the same. It's just that I've gotten into some of the things that I would say on there in a much deeper level, in a deeper way, like my understanding of how I arrived at, who I am and why I say the things that I do. So I had posted a video last week of some of my first football throws, and a lot of you started saying, you followed me at this time or that time or all these different things. And I kind of realized how like social media can be so kind of all over the place and quick hits. Like there's no, real consistency to it at times. So I wanted to start a podcast just so I could share more with you in a more like clear, concise way. And then also hopefully you learn and take stuff from this, even if you're just entertained at some of my stories, whatever it is. I want this to be like a fun place that you can come and have a takeaway from, right? So first, like if you don't know me, yes, my name is Callie Fitzgerald Bundy, and yeah, I went viral for throwing footballs on the internet. So I was the first girl to do it. I created it. I started doing it, and it changed my life. It like when I say it went viral, this was back in like 2016, 17 when the internet was like pure and there was no algorithms or anything, and massively viral. Like it went, I think it was like some account, it was back when Instagram actually had put up the 1 minute video clips. So I had been doing my football throws, but I then was able to take like, I think it was like 5 or 6 of the throws and clip them all together in this 1 minute video. And then I posted it, and it was a weekend, and I think it was a holiday weekend, so I wasn't really on my phone. And then one of my friends had texted me, it was like Sunday or Monday, and they were like, hey, have you looked at, social media lately? And I'm like, no. And they're like, you're going viral. So I go and I look, and some account on Facebook actually had posted it first, and it had gotten like 25 million views in like 3 days or something like that. And then like all of these sites started picking it up and just blasting it out at the same time. So it was like, Lad Bible, Bleacher Report, Barstool. Barstool was probably like the second account actually that posted my video. And then I was like, ESPN and all these huge, accounts were posting it everywhere, and it was just blasted. I was unprepared for the amount of attention, I guess you could say, that I was getting from it. And I remember being like, what is happening? Like companies were reaching out asking to, like buy the video. They were asking about licensing rights, all these different things. So I actually had a talent agency that had reached out to me at the time and offered to represent and work with me. And, I didn't even know I had, TV agents and things like that, but I didn't even know that back then that there were agencies that worked with social media people. So, and, through, that exposure, it changed my life. Like I started getting all these different kinds of opportunities and things coming my way. Like I was just basically at a point in my life, I had been competing in fitness competitions, and I had gotten bored because it's such a subjective thing. And I really learned a lot doing it because I was a 3-sport athlete growing up. I played soccer, basketball, softball through high school, and then I played Division I softball in college. So sports were literally all I did. It was my life. Like I always say that sports made me who I am and taught me so many lessons. was at a point where, like, I knew when it came to training for like my sports, I was training to, run faster, be stronger, throw farther, all these things, where then once I stopped doing that, I was bored and I really missed training. So I wanted to find something that I could train for again. So that's actually why I started doing the fitness competitions. I think I was at a job and I had run into somebody who was doing them, and it kind of started piquing my interest. So the actually too, the funny thing about that was I absolutely hated being on stage for those fitness competitions. Like, the training to me was fun, the two-a-days were fun. I'd always done two-a-days. But when I had to get on stage and actually be a female, because you're also getting scored on your stage presence, your hair, your makeup, your suit color choice, all the whole presentation, not just the body. So you had to really, be in your feminine energy. And I had never done anything like that. I was not a dancer. I did not do anything. I was like the exact opposite. I was a huge tomboy growing up. I was always in like cleats or sneakers, a hat. I remember at one point in college, some girl came up to me when we were out and she was like, "Oh my God, you're the girl that always wears the red hat. I always wondered what you look like." And because that's how often I wore a hat. So I'd gotten bored of it because it was so subjective too, right? Like, so when you were going on these stages to be judged, sometimes it felt like there was like no criteria, right? And then there was criteria, but then there wasn't criteria. Like, it could be very confusing. And then I had just gotten to a point where I was bored with it. I'd done it for like maybe 5 or 6 years, and just going up there to spin around on stage wasn't doing it for me anymore. So I really missed sports. I really missed playing sports, and all my friends were grown-ups. So I was like, man, I really wish I could just go throw a football again, because that was something I enjoyed doing. And because I couldn't find anyone to throw footballs with, I just started going out to like elementary school playgrounds and like setting up targets and throwing footballs around. And then I just started filming it because it was fun to me, and just throwing them up on the internet. And I started to notice like I was getting such an adverse reaction to them, especially from males, because I think like the first one I did, or one of the first ones I did, like the ball had actually gone like out of the frame, right? And then came back in. And again, this was back in like 2016. And people were commenting like, "Oh, the ball left the frame. She's using CGI." I'm like, CGI? What? What influencer? Like, again, I don't think that term creator, like none of those terms existed at those times, but like I was just out there with my iPhone filming throws. Like, what, CGI? What are we doing here, people? Take it down a notch. But so they would get mad that the ball would leave the frame. So I'm like, okay. So then when I would film it, I would set it up so that me, the ball, and the target all stayed in frame. So the only way for me to do that by myself out there filming was to like turn around and set the camera up right behind me. So then, you're seeing the back of me while I'm filming. And then of course guys are like, "Oh, you're just doing this to show off your butt and blah, blah, blah." And I'm like, have you seen football pants? Are you aware as a male of what football pants look like? Because they look exactly like the pants that I'm wearing. So if I was a male wearing football pants right now, none of these comments would be made. And that to me, like, it was like one of the most wild things. That's the first thing they said. And then I started to realize, oh, I'm triggering these men by being able to throw a football better than they can. So they're trying to attack my sexuality and femininity as a way to make themselves feel better. I'm like, oh, this is fascinating, right? So it was super interesting. But so that's like, those people being triggered by that actually were the ones who were making my videos the most popular. So then it was funny though, because again, I started going viral for them, and then it was like a whole wave of, again, like crazy amounts of people, right? Millions of people commenting on my videos and things like this. And so it was funny. I would just start going through like the comments and trolling people because, of course, all the jokes, which was kind of disappointing to me as a lover of humor, because I believe humor is just intelligence having fun, because you can't be funny and not be smart. It's just a fact. You have to be smart to be able to be funny, because when it's true, that's what makes it funny. So a lot of the comments, like there were people like, oh, great, now she can throw me like, a sandwich from the kitchen. And it's like, is that supposed to be funny? Didn't really find it funny, especially when literally every dude is saying it. It's like, if you want to be funny, you have to be intelligent and original. So maybe you need to get back in the kitchen and pick yourself up a better joke. Maybe that's what we're talking about. But actually, it did give me, for one of my videos, I threw a ball and I turned around and said, sorry, it wasn't a sandwich. So like, it gave me good material. But the majority of the jokes and the cuts overall were disappointingly not interesting and not funny. But it was wild. So those videos, yeah, like they changed my life. And literally, I couldn't go anywhere. People would see me and they would yell out like, hey, Callie, throw something. Like, like I remember literally, I think I was in like Dallas or somewhere in an airport check-in line, and a group of guys, like I'm on my phone not paying attention, and I hear Callie, and I turn around and they're like, throw something. And that was literally all people wanted to see, was like see me throw things, right? But it was the coolest thing ever. Like, again, I ended up being on SportsCenter. I ended up, having companies like the Yankees reach out to me, to work on the Pinstripe Bowl. I went with the Olympic Channel to Germany to cover the GFL, which is the German Football League. I was on TBS, on the Go Big Show. All these opportunities that came into my life simply because I started throwing footballs on the internet. And what's wild about it too was I was never taught how to throw a football. I was a former softball player, so I was a pitcher and third base. So I just converted really my third base throw into a football throw. And the only thing I knew that I would tell myself when I was throwing was, don't flip your wrist, because I knew when I flipped my wrist, I was going like softball style, and that's when I would throw ducks. So just keep my wrist straight was all I knew. And then everything else was just a feeling. Like I knew when I felt it, if it was going to be a good throw or not. So I was never taught how to throw a football. I taught myself. Actually, in college, when I played softball, we had a fall ball season and we had our regular season in the spring, which of course we came back early too for like indoor training and stuff. But we had like a month in the fall, and me and a bunch of my friends who played on sports teams or were just like big tomboys, we started playing pickup football games. So during that, I realized, hey, I can kind of throw a spiral. So since then, I've always kept a football with me and always trying to get people to play catch with me, because I just like how it feels coming out of my hand. And I just do. I don't know. And it wasn't an option for me to play football then, so I just went out and started throwing footballs on like elementary school playgrounds just to have fun. So like there was no intent behind what I was doing. It just satisfied me. So they went viral. Again, they changed my life. And then that's how a lot of you started finding me on social media. And that's really, what I've been doing for like the last, 7 to 9 years. And then one day I got a call from a casting director for an opportunity to be on a show on TBS called The Go Big Show. And when they called me, I was just about 6 months postpartum. I had just had my son. So basically for about the last year and a half at least, I had not trained. I had not thrown a football. I had not done anything besides, of course, grow a human inside of me. So not that I wasn't doing anything. I was obviously bringing life to this earth. But when it came to, and we got a new visitor, it's my dog Moxie right here. We basically, what was I going to say? Oh, I was bringing life to the earth, but I was not doing anything football related or training or working out or anything like that. So I remember being like, me? You want me to come on the show? And I'm like, I haven't done a thing, you know? And they're like, oh no, we think it's great. We really love it. Like, you know, you're this mom that throws footballs and da da da. And I'm like, I don't know. Like, I even tried to talk them out of having me on it because I was like, I don't know if I'm ready for this. And they were filming in like maybe 5 months or something. So I ended up booking it and, you know, went and we filmed outside of Atlanta down in a place called Macon, Georgia. And it was kind of like in the middle of nowhere. It was like 2 hours outside of Atlanta. And it was August or the end of September, I think, when we started filming. So it was hot. It was, you know, interesting because I didn't really get to do much training or anything before I even went down there because, again, I was a new mom with a like 6, 7 month old, right? So, and I was nursing at the time. And so, but I go down there and I'm like, all right, we'll figure this out. I go down there and, you know, I start throwing balls around and I'm like, man, my arm doesn't feel right. And my arm and everything, you know, again, I played 3 sports through high school, softball in college, was throwing footballs, and never bothered me. And I barely ever, outside of like broken noses, you know, broken fingers, cleats through my knees, stuff like that. I never even had like a surgery that was sports related or anything like that. So I was like, this is weird. And then I was actually having to take like acetaminophen and stuff to be even able to throw because that's how bad the pain was. And this story basically taught me the lesson that sometimes the win that we want comes as a loss, but we just don't realize it till way after. So I go on this show, right? It's not going good. I remember we weren't allowed, we were filming during COVID, so everything, like we were locked down. We had the whole hotel just for talent. And it was the coolest show ever. Like everyone else who filmed on the show everybody had a different talent. So there was like bull riders, you know, alligator guys, you know, girls who like, you know, shot arrows with their feet. You know, tight line, rope walkers, like high line, all these different things, like all these really cool, unique, different talents. So our hotel was only for us. It was completely rented out just for talent. But again, it was COVID, so everything was locked down. Like we weren't allowed to leave besides to, you know, go over to set to film or practice or things like that. But everything was documented, like scheduled. You had to scan in, scan out, all this stuff, like full lockdown, right? But so we were all at this hotel and we weren't allowed to leave or go anywhere. So I was doing like some circuit training. I was just running laps around the parking lot and then I would, you know, stop and I would mix in some like body weight conditioning stuff. So I was doing like push-ups and I went to go do dips on like this little, like, you know, like curb basically on the sidewalk. And I went to do that and ooh, I was like, that's not good. We got a problem here. But what was I going to do, right? It was a learning lesson, is how I will put it. At the time, I'm like, this is a disaster. Now, in retrospect, I realize that my wisdom has taught me it was a learning lesson. So I filmed my first episode on the show, and I was the first one to film that day. And they film a bunch of things. Like they film the walkthrough, then they'll film like a live to tape, then they film the live one. So they do all these different takes. And so mine, because it was just me throwing footballs at targets and stuff in the arena, required less setup. Like there was people, I had to bring in like truckloads of dirt and put like dirt down and stuff for people that were doing like the bull riding things. So, you know, there was a lot involved in the layout of things. But so I went in that day, I think it was like 11 a.m. and I filmed my tape walkthrough and it was great, right? Then I went and I sat and waited for my turn to like film the real one. They called me, I think it was like, and again, we're just sitting in this staging room. It was like 11:59 p.m. They're like, okay, Callie, start warming up. So I had filmed at 11 a.m. and then I sat there all day until basically about 12 o'clock at night when they called me to come out for my actual taping. And again, I was like 11 months postpartum. I was already in, you know, normally in sleep by like 9 o'clock at night, you know, with my child. Like, I'm like, what are we doing? It's, you know, 12 o'clock at night. I'm about to film this athletic feat. So I went out there and there was this kind of like the first thing I had 3 targets set up, and I got to choose like my layout. I had a producer, they would work on me like, hey, this is what we're gonna do. And I basically did like whatever my producer said. Hey, I think this would be cool. Cool. I did it. And so we had these 3 targets set up, and like each one got progressively further back. I remember I went out for the first one, and that one, like in every practice and everything, I did not miss. Like I was not, and you can ask my producer, I was not missing when we would practice. Like I was money. So we go out there to film this thing. Now again, you have a, I don't know, millions of dollar TV set that you're on. We had, the judges were like Snoop, Cody Rhodes, uh, Jennifer Nettles, and Rosario Dawson, and then the host was Bert Kreischer, and they're all watching, right? And because it was COVID, we couldn't have any fans in there, so it's like dead silent, no music, nothing. So I try to like get warmed up as best as I can, right? Because they're like, okay, we'll find somebody to warm up with you, right? So they get some production guy, and we start warming up, and then I go out, and I'm like, okay, say my opening line, turn to go and like throw at the first target, and I miss. And it like totally just threw me off because I had not missed the whole time. And I remember I'm like, whoa. So I pick up another ball, throw it again, miss again. Pick up another ball, throw it again, miss again. And now at this point I'm getting like nervous and angry, and all these like feelings are starting to come out. And then I just completely like black out. Like the only thing I could hear, I remember Snoop saying, the ball goes where your toe goes. The ball goes where your toe goes. And I'm like, I know, but literally it was like a blackout. Like I don't know if you've ever had this happen. And I just couldn't hit the broad side of a barn. Like it was a disaster. And then on top of that, I was supposed to be like stopping to talk to say these lines, when if you played real sports, right, the last thing you want to do when you're mad and things aren't going your way is like smile for the camera and say a line. And especially throwing. Throwing for me is such a rhythm thing that like stopping to talk and do that really takes away from like my athletic flow. So it was just an overall disaster. The good news was I did hit my full court shot on the first throw, which saved me because that basically got me through like to the next round. But it was basically like, okay, we hit this or we're going home. And so, and there was a lot of money on the line, like, that we could win and all this stuff. So I hit that shot and that was great. So that kept me there. But man, that was an absolute disaster. Like I forgot how to, when I played sports and like, you would have something not go your way and how that felt. And then like to know that I had to wait till, the next time that I was going to film. And I didn't know when that was because, again, they were filming this all in rounds, right? And then they're scoring, then people are getting sent home. So like you really had no idea, were you going to film in a week? Were you going to film in 2 weeks? It's production. So you just kind of going with the flow. So, but as an athlete to like sit with that performance and then not be able to like redeem yourself, it's the worst feeling in the world. And I forgot, because I hadn't had that happen in like so long, because I wasn't playing real sports anymore, how much of a terrible feeling that is. And man, I was so mad. So I'm like, okay, what are we going to do here? And so I had gotten myself, prepared for the next round. And the next round I did much better. My arm was still killing me. But I had gotten even some advice from a lot of the people I was on the show with were, people who do actually travel around the world, like showcasing their skills, right? Like some of my friends that I made, they go around and they're like halftime performances at, football and basketball games and all this stuff. And, had been on TV shows, and they actually gave me some great advice. And, because I felt too like I, maybe was trying to like make my producer more happy than do what I felt more comfortable doing. Because I was like, oh, well, they know TV, I should do this. And some of the people were like, hey, listen, don't let your producer bully you or like tell you what you should be doing. Remember, it's your act, you're the one that's representing yourself. They're not out there when things go wrong. So you do and choose the stunts like that you want to do. And you take, again, and I was like, oh, okay, cool, good advice. Because I didn't even know it was like an option too, that like I could have a say. So I remember when it came to planning the next round, what we were going to do, there was certain things and I'm like, no, we're not doing that. We're going to do this. And it really worked in my favor. So I ended up losing in the second round, but my second round was much better than my first round. And always keep in mind, it's reality TV. So just keep that in mind. But anyway, I went home and I'm like, all right, there's something going on with my shoulder, right? Because my shoulder was killing me like the whole time. I'm taking the acetaminophen and just like pain. I get the MRI and my surgeon was like, first of all, I don't know how you hit the broadside of a barn while you were like doing what you did, because you have 3 tears in your labrum and a torn capsule. So like basically he said my shoulder was just like floating. It wasn't attached to anything. So I was devastated, of course, because now again, I'm about a year postpartum. So, with my son, and then I find out about my shoulder, which was, really providing a lot of my livelihood for me, that now I'm going to have to get surgery. And then, from what I learned, they're like, it's going to be about 12 months before you can start throwing again. And then at the same time, I was married at the time, and I had been with that person for a long time, and I no longer wanted to be there. So there was a divorce going on, and I find out about my shoulder. Like, it seemed like the whole world was basically collapsing on me, right? I think I even got COVID at the time. Even it was like insult to injury. Like, it was just like one thing after the other, right? So I get the surgery and I start my rehab. And it was actually through my shoulder surgery that was part of what helped awaken me and helped get me to like this more conscious state, and helped, really bring in more clarity about like who I was and what I wanted to do. And even again, the change in my content, right? And like I talk about, my spiritual awakening all really started because of my torn shoulder. So I got the surgery, I start the rehab, and then the way I operate, like I'm so in tune with my body and what I need, that when I started my physical therapy 3 days post-op, and I went in for one appointment, and it was, referred by, the surgeon and the, facility that they were associated with. And I remember getting into the second one and I was like, this isn't it. And it just, not that it was bad, it just wasn't for me. I could tell that it was just kind of for people who were looking to recover from whatever it is they had, but maybe not necessarily in an athletic way, right? So I started looking around for physical therapists who specifically rehabbed throwing athletes. And I found one and I'm like, okay, boom, this is great. I made the switch, went and started seeing him. And that was awesome. And definitely was way worth it, because I think too, what people don't realize with surgery, they think that when you get a surgery that it's automatically fixing the problem. No, the surgery is the reset of whatever needed to be repaired. But now you start the recovery. And unless you do your recovery right after a surgery, it's almost like the surgery might have been pointless if you weren't going to go all in on your recovery, right? Because it's all in how you recover, that is actually what's going to build the foundation for, again, the reset of your surgery, right? That's how you get there. So I knew, again, I had about 12 months to do this. So I made the switch, started going with, the physical therapist who worked specifically with throwing athletes. And then I got my sling off at 6 weeks. And I remember my surgeon was like, all right, the good news is that you heal fast, but the bad news is you heal fast. So you have frozen shoulder. So he gave me a few options. He said, you can take steroids, a cortisone shot, or muscle relaxers. And the way my mind works, I'm like, okay, well, you just told me that I heal fast. So that means that I could probably avoid those things and just do more physical or soft tissue work on my body and get a similar result, right? So I had actually met someone who owned his own facility, his own gym, and his name was Mike Latrina, and he was a biomechanics therapist. So I called him up, I told him what was going on, and he was like, all right, no, don't do that, just come in and see me. So he came in, I went in there and he worked on my arm probably for like 45 minutes, an hour on his table. Again, just doing like manipulations and having me move certain ways. And I remember I got up from the table and I'm like, wait, what do you do again? Like, who are you? Because again, lifelong athlete, fitness competitor. I had done I'm so into, like massage, therapy, soft tissue work, like anything that I could do that was tied to like a higher level of performance. So I was very picky about all those things. And like, I was mind blown getting off his table that first time. Like, I'm like, I don't understand how you just did what you did. And I started calling him Magic Mike because he's literally like a body magician. So I saw him one other time and then I went back to see my surgeon. And he said, all right, I don't know what you did, but keep doing it because you don't have frozen shoulder and you don't need any of those drugs. And I'm like, rock and roll, baby, let's go. So I started, I finished out my physical therapy, and then I was also going to see Mike in between for touch-ups because they kind of do two different things. So once I was fully finished with my physical therapy, which I want to say was around like maybe 6 or 7 months, and a big thanks to them too. They even got that extended for me because at the time, I think it was like my insurance didn't want to keep paying for it. And the owner of the facility was great. He called them and he was like, listen, my client throws footballs on the internet and right now she can't do that. So she needs X amount of more visits to get her there. And they put it through. So that was pretty awesome. But so that finished out. And then I think it was like that last week I was there with him, we actually started throwing footballs. And again, it was mostly just like going through the motion. And, it was like 10 throws maybe. But I was like, okay, this is great. Like we're at like 7 months and I'm able to do an actual throwing motion. So now I want to be able to start working with a trainer who can help me start rebuilding my strength because I was at the weakest point like I could remember in my adult life because again, now, we're probably 2 years postpartum, right? So a year, 2 years ago, I had a baby. Then a year after that, I had the shoulder surgery. And so it was like I wasn't able to train or really do anything the way that I had in the past. So I was starting from ground zero. Like I couldn't even do a regular push-up. It was like push-ups on my knees. So I wanted to make sure that I was, again, working with a trainer who knew, okay, I'm an athlete, I'm throwing, this is what I'm doing, and then also a gym that I could throw at. So I found a gym, and it was called Blue Streak. Jay was the owner there, and that was awesome. He was like, yeah, I'm in. So he started working with me, and we're using like either no weight, 5-pound weights, and that went awesome. And, he really helped me get me to like a solid place. But then as always kind of happens for me, I was kind of started getting the feeling that I needed to like move on to the next thing, the next phase of whatever it was. And so I had ended up switching at that point to another gym. And I want to say that was, so that was probably like, another 7 or 8 months when I switched to this other gym. And that gym was Prentice Performance. And again, explained to them what I was doing, what my objectives were, and they were fantastic. And they got me really to the strongest point that I had really been in my adult life too. Like when I was competing in fitness competitions, my last year that I competed was the strongest that I ever was. And I think that was just more of a result of I was getting, again, bored of like the outcomes and things like that. So I was like, whatever, you know what I'm going to do? I'm just going to get strong as hell. Like I'm just going to lift as much weight as I can because I'd never done that. And I did get strong. Like I was like deadlifting like 215, like, I was leg pressing like 600 pounds. Like I was strong and I'm naturally like pretty strong. So, it's not hard for me to get there, but, then I at a certain point, I was like, do I really need to be deadlifting 215 pounds? Like, what is that going to do to my body long term? That's kind of why I let it go the first time. But then, so with Prentice, they had got me to, again, the strongest point in my adult life, outside of like the fitness year. So that was going great. And at the time, what I was training for was I had gotten a call from some TV company out of Italy, and they wanted me to come and do some Guinness record on the show involving throwing football. So I had gone on all in. Like I was like, all right, great, we got another opportunity. But this time, these are all the things that I'm going to do different from the first time. So one of the things was like, I'm going to be prepared. I'm not going to, when I was on the Go Big show and my throws started breaking down, even though, of course, I had 3 labrum tears and a torn capsule, when my throws started breaking down, because I had never been taught how to throw a football, I didn't have any like mental cues to bring myself back online, right? Like if I was playing, soccer or basketball or softball, like I knew because I had been trained like what to do to bring myself back in. Where football for me was just like, a feeling. So when my throws started going off, I didn't know how to get back. Like I couldn't mentally get there. So I'm like, all right, I need somebody to actually teach me how to throw a football the right way so that I can have those mental cues, that I'll get through it to pull myself back in. So I'm like, all right, I need a throwing coach. The best throwing coach there is. Let me reach out to Tom House. So, and don't know him, don't know anyone who knows him. So I just sent him a message on social media and said, hey, Tom, like you don't know me. My name's Callie. I'm the girl that throws footballs on the internet. I'm, training for this record. I've never been taught how to throw football. I'm recovering from, soldier surgery. But, I'd love to work with you if you're open with it. And he responded right away. I was like, yeah, let's get on a call. And I was so shocked like that he responded and was that open to even working with me, right? But that like 15-minute, 10-minute phone call that I had with him the first time just to go through everything, incredible. I had thrown things my entire life. I learned more about throwing in that 10-minute phone call with Tom than I had in my entire career, really. And like on a level too, where I was excited about it because he was talking about like, your myelin sheath and the nerves and how many reps you need to undo basically a sports movement and then recreate a new sports movement. Because what happens is when our body is signaling for our nerves to get different movements to happen. So like, your swing or your throw, whatever you're doing, right? Your body is signaling for those nerves to move those muscles for that motion to happen. So it develops this like myelin sheath around the nerves, right? And then if you want to change that movement, you then need to undo all of that to create the new movement. And I'm like, this is fascinating because that kind of stuff gets me excited. So he was based on a different coast than I was. So I actually started working with some of his guys that were located closer to me. And it was awesome. Like I could train and do stuff like that like all day long. And what's great about it too is like I was showing up to throw with like these baseball, and I think it was mostly baseball at that time, players who were like high school and college, and they were either like, getting recruited or, trying to go pro or whatever it was. And then there's all these guys, right? Like high school, college guys, and then me, just this random girl that throws footballs on the internet. And we're doing their warm-ups, we're in a gym and it's like a basketball court, and I'm lining up with these guys and stuff. And I wonder if they were like, what's happening? But to me, it was normal because, again, that was like my life, right? And also so fun for me. So I started doing that, and we, had dialed in like what my record was going to be. I was training. I was feeling awesome. I'm like, yes, let's go. And then I get a call from the company, and they're like, oh, this production's put on pause. Like, well, we'll follow up if it gets restarted again. And I was like, man. So like here I had been training and like doing all these things for years, really, to like get myself back to, because of my goal was like, I want to throw footballs better now than I did before. So like better post baby, better post surgery than I did before. And so it felt like that was kind of just taken away from me, Like I was like, well, man, what am I going to do now? And then I was kind of like, okay, maybe I'll like reach out to them separately. But it kind of like what was happening too at the time was it seemed like everything in the world that had been like lined up for me to go in that direction was kind of getting pulled away from me. And so I was like, all right, well, if this is meant to happen, it'll happen. Then I was really being called to like stop working out altogether. And that was last December. And I was like, what? Like, what are we doing here? And it was just basically like all of these things that I had really like identified and like put into my ego, right? I was being asked to really like let go of. So I did. And then the more that I did that and the more that I trusted like the direction that I was going in, because I've always done that, I just flow with like what it feels good to me, right? So I had started working with a sports book and I was doing online, like I was the face for an online sports book. And then they got bought out by another large sports book and they only bought the technology. So then that got taken away from me. And I'm like, well, okay. So then I went all in on energy and spirituality and I started like researching and basically like testing all of these things that I had learned along the way. And what's wild about that is had like in retrospect, all that not happened, right? Had I not hurt my shoulder, had I not gone through what I did, all the information about like my energy healing method that I came up with all came as a result of all of that, because then I was able to put the pieces together and change this all. Because when I started working with the biomechanics therapist, I was starting to realize too, like, oh, we're recovering all wrong. We need to be doing this and we need to be doing that. And I wanted to like start my podcast then and tell the whole world like, hey, this is what you got to do. This is what you need to do. But then like, as I kept going, like more information kept coming to me and it was like, things were still shifting and changing and I didn't like I just knew it wasn't the right time yet. I remember even like, people that knew me in real life, they would be like, why don't you talk about this stuff on your social media? And it just wasn't time yet. And so, and I'm glad that I didn't too, because it's like now that I've waited and I've gotten more information, it changes everything that I would be talking about. So that's what I mean when I want to be the person I am today, basically. So then when I stopped working out, I started testing a lot of my energy theories. Like I started wondering like, if they say that working out and eating healthy is the best thing that we can do for ourselves, then we should see people that do that living the longest. But overall, we're not really. And sometimes it's like actually the complete opposite, right? Like people that have spent their whole lives living, in a quote unquote unhealthy way actually do live the longest. So I started wondering, I wonder what would happen if I stopped working out. So I stopped working out and then I started testing my energy method during all of this. And what was interesting about that was very similar to the football stuff. So like, over the course of this past year, when I was posting videos, like I was physically changing a lot because my body was like realigning basically, I guess. But even to the point, like when I stopped working out, as a female, we carry more estrogen, which means that we have more fat than males do. And then of course that's for us to have babies, right? Or grow a baby. So, and it's usually around, like our chest and our hips and that area, right? So when I was posting my videos, all because I just stopped working out, I had gotten more voluptuous in certain areas and people were commenting like all these things like, oh, you shouldn't have gotten that surgery and you shouldn't do this and, like you went too big and like all these things when like I was just cracking up because I'm like, this is wild what people assume with no like understanding or proof of anything. They just start throwing these things out there when the only thing that I did was stop working out. That was it. So, And then like as I did that, and then it was funny over the next few months, my body, so it got like a little puffier first, and then it slimmed down, and then it kind of like hit its normal like homeostasis point, right? Like its set point. And so, but then what was cool was as I was doing that, I was actually getting healthier. I was physically getting healthier. And I'm like, this is the coolest thing ever. Like, I felt better, like, my metabolism, everything was better. But so, and then in doing that, it really allowed me to study energy firsthand on myself and on my body. And because of my background in sports and my fitness competitions and being so dialed into the body and my own body and like just really being hyper aware of that, when I was working with energy, I was starting to learn so many things. And I'm like, this is the coolest thing ever. So that is actually how I developed my energy method, was by researching and experimenting on myself for basically, again, the past 4 years, ever since I tore my shoulder. So that's what I mean when I say sometimes the win that we wanted comes as a loss. So I thought my shoulder tear was a loss at the time, when actually it was the biggest one in my life. Like, the information that I hold today, the knowledge I hold today, the person that I am today, never would I have gotten there without this happening. So I think it's really important in life, like perspective, everything. Because again, life isn't sunshine and lollipops. I think people too, they see social media and they just assume, like, oh, if you smile and you're not an unattractive person, that you have this perfect, amazing life, when that couldn't be further from the truth. To me, the way I always looked at social media is like it should be entertaining and it should be fun. So I always wanted to I wanted like people who came there to just leave with a smile, right? Because there was enough places in the world where you could go and have that not happen. But as I've evolved and as I've changed, and then as I've like helped myself get out of those places, I realized that I can now do the same thing for other people. So if you're wondering, yeah, the change in my content, and that's why, like I said, like it's a much bigger conversation, because it's essentially to my whole life. Like, and I think that's how it works, right? Like, because as we become more conscious, and I always talk about this, right? Your conscious and your subconscious. So, but when you become more conscious, you become more conscious of your own subconscious behavior too. And then you look back at patterns or things or experiences in your life, but now you have this new conscious lens and you can see things like, oh, this is why that happened, or this is why this had to happen, or that's why that happened. And I think that can be so beneficial for everyone, because oftentimes we view bad things happening in our life through the lens of old experiences. And then that alone starts to build up subconscious programming in us, right? So then when we enter into a new situation, we might be like, oh, here we go, same thing's going to happen again, right? When that's not actually the case. That's just your subconscious programming talking. But the way energy works, if you put out that thought, right, that is what the universe will give you back. And that is why energy is so important, because it's literally everything. Everything is energy. And energy that is created can never be destroyed. Do you know how powerful it is? Like, think about that for 1 second. Energy that is created can never be destroyed. It can be transmuted, it can be changed into something else. But so you're talking about any energy that is created can never be destroyed. That's wild. And then everything happens energetically first. So that's where our thoughts create our reality. Like, people always say things like, oh, well, it's just my thought. It's not, no, your thought is creating your reality. And then too, like, there's so many things I started to realize that people like don't, either it's being like misexplained or, wrongly explained, or, sometimes people that are also giving a lot of energetic advice, they're not fully healed yet. So again, you have to be careful of whose lens it's being spoken through, right? So like one of the things like people always talk about, like manifesting, like, oh, I'm manifesting now. No, we've all always manifested. It's not like you start manifesting. You may start consciously manifesting the life that you want to live, but the life that you're living right now, even if you have never consciously manifested, you manifested that reality based on your energy. No matter what your situation is, you have manifested that life in this moment based on your energy. Because again, remember, everything happens energetically first. And your energy, your subconscious and your conscious programming is energy. But the subconscious programming is so much more important to pay attention to, because those are things that we've been like conditioned into believing, and sometimes we don't even know it. And it also it goes so deep too, because that subconscious programming can come from, like, for example, females were all born with the amount of eggs that we'll ever have, okay? So that means when your mother was a baby inside of your grandmother, that egg that made you was inside your mom, inside your grandma. So part of that subconscious programming can be from things your grandma was experiencing when she was pregnant with your mom, because part of your DNA, that egg, already existed and it's already collecting energy. So for example, I like to use this example, because you may find that you're like a little bit of a hoarder when it comes to food, right? Like you're like, oh, we always need 2 of everything. We've got to have this. We got to make sure we don't run out. When in this life that you're living, you have no reason to exist that way. Like you've never run out of food. You have food. Like it's never been an issue. You even have an excess of food, right? But maybe your grandmother exists when there was some kind of famine or economic situation where, yeah, food was going to be an issue. So you've picked up that subconscious programming in you that is affecting your energy in this lifetime. So it's so important to identify and make sure that you're not carrying forward like some of these energies that you no longer need, right? And are basically like, because your conscious mind isn't even aware that your subconscious self is doing this. So I like to describe it basically like if you've ever gotten up to plate and you play, baseball or softball, and you're in a hitting slump and you're up there. Like I told the story last week where I was in a hitting slump in college, and I would get up to the plate and it was so bad at that point, like I would, be like, okay, here we go. And my head would say one thing, and then I'd gotten to the point where like my body just wasn't reacting, like nothing was happening. And I actually, did a watered down version of what I do now. And I realized that when I told that story was, I told myself, okay, self, today what we're going to do, we're going to see the ball, hit the ball. So I started changing the subconscious programming, and I ended up hitting 2 home runs that game. But my point is, that is what happens when your conscious and your subconscious programming aren't connected, right? So like my head was saying one thing, but my body was saying another. And it was disrupting the programming. So what we want to do is get your conscious and subconscious programming running the same program so they're not competing. Because otherwise what happens when we start getting these competing programs, it starts to affect you with like brain fog, doubting yourself, anger, all these like what I call lower vibrational emotions start coming up when you're running this subconscious programming that you're not even aware of. But it presents itself in your behaviors and in your emotions. So if you aren't happy, if you aren't feeling love, if you aren't feeling joy, if you aren't feeling bliss, if you aren't feeling all those things, I can almost guarantee you have subconscious programming that needs to be transmuted out of you. And I can do that with, help basically assist you with my energy method and identifying, those behaviors and what we need to fix. So had I not gone through all those things and taken all those paths, and again, even, started throwing footballs, got the tear in my shoulder, because all of that along the way is what led me to the realization of energy and of energy healing and of how all of this works. And so that's the kind of stuff that I'm going to be sharing. I'm going to be telling these stories, and, talking about like energy, spirituality, all these different things on here. So, but I'm going to be talking way more about that. I just wanted to give you the groundwork of like where this is going, what we're going to be talking about, because it's absolutely fascinating. And again, they're such big conversations. It's hard to just jump in and, like some of you like, hey, you just want like a 1 or 2 sentence answer. It's not really like that. It's like my life's work of how I ended up here and in this moment and sharing this with you. So that is episode 1. I hope you enjoyed it. If you have any suggestions too, or like things that you want me to cover, please leave in the comments because I'll definitely be checking that kind of stuff out. But till next time, stay awesome.